Marketer of the day, number 431. Bridge the gap between success and relationships. Harness your inner hero and shift your thinking with Optimal Life Coach Laura Long. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening. We're talking right now with Laura Long, and Laura is passionate about her business as a life coach, an energy worker, and a teacher. However, it does not define her, complete her, or even drive her. That's been the download message from the universe that's been deleted a few times until it went into her hard drive, so to speak. And now the power of being drives her more than the power of doing and doing and doing. From her own experiences, Laura, and her website is lauralong.pro. Laura works with open-minded, driven professionals who have had success yet still feel there's something missing, and people who are ready to bridge that gap between their outer success and their inner peace and relationship success. Sounds like lots of fun. How are things, Laura?
I'm great. How are you?
Better than ever. Fantastic. Having a great time and looking forward to the weekend, although the week's fun too. So you're life coach, energy worker, teacher, and so lots of people out there are life coaches and things like that. So what makes you stand out? What makes you different and special?
Well, I think it's partly my experience as this very person that I work with who had a whole bunch of the external successes and then suddenly found my life upside down one day where all of that went away and I had to look and see what was inside. And there was a big hole in there. And at that time, it just kind of felt like the Grand Canyon in there, you know?
Yeah.
And so that just sent me on a path of seeking furiously, actually. Quite honestly, I was just trying madly to fill that hole. And that just led me to so many different paths of awareness. I studied everything from Buddhism to acupressure to yoga to EFT and different forms of all of that. And all of that together, as well as the teaching. The teaching was super, super, super influential. But all of that together, I kept seeing the same message, which was that we have an external world and we don't always identify it or align it with our internal world, so that we're always dependent upon what's outside of us. So all of that message kept coming through in all of my work. And so I decided that I would pull it together, all of the skills that I have acquired, all of my seeking, pull it all together and help people to actually start to find that inner alignment with themselves. And so how that makes me different from everybody else who's trying to do the same thing is that I have this vast array of processes that I work with that I've learned in my path of seeking. And I pull that together. I work with somebody not only cognitively, you know, in conversation and with their thoughts, but I also work with their energetic system. And I also teach them. I teach them how to sustain that and embody what they want. So it becomes a whole process.
And that sounds super great. And what it sounds like from the way that you're describing this is that you cover all the angles, right? Some people just say, well, do some yoga, work on your body, or some people just say, you know, here's some therapy advice. But it sounds like you kind of take all of the solutions and have it packaged together in one thing that takes care of everything.
Yeah, it pretty much does cover all the parts of us. And my background is also for 30 years. I worked in the medical and leadership roles in medical administration. So whenever you work in medicine, you have to understand the language of medicine a little bit. So you have to understand, you know, what the doctors that you're dealing with are going through and what they're working with. So there became, you know, after 30 years, quite a bit of understanding of the physical body from the, you know, Western medicine paradigm, so to speak. But then also I studied from the traditional Chinese medicine method and became an acupressurist part-time as well for 10 years. So that also, when I was working as an acupressurist, I also covered medical, a little bit of medical, not in lieu of regular medicine, not in lieu of the regular doctor. So I recognize that sometimes when we are really out of alignment with what is really super important to us. And that's kind of different for everybody, but usually it has something to do with relationships in some form, being in our own relationship with ourselves and that with our world around us. Um, is that sometimes it shows up physically. It shows up as pain or tension or something that you think that you wouldn't necessarily the first line think about your emotions. So I look at that as well as what's going on in the body. And that helps a lot because it's actually sometimes our endpoint as to saying that there's something out of alignment there.
Okay, so great. So you've seen it all over the various years and the jobs you've held, and you've seen how sometimes things are connected, and then maybe if we have a symptom of something, the cause maybe might not be what we expect. And so I like this idea of you have of like the inside and the outside are a little bit misaligned, a bit mismatched, and so that I think I understand what that means. But just to make sure that we're all on the same page here, can you kind of lay it out for us what that was like for you? You said that things got to a certain point where something had to change. The inside didn't match the outside. You went on this whole journey of discovery. So, what was that like when you were just in that really bad place?
It was just, it had a real physical sense to it in the way of I really did not know where my feet were. I think the first person that I spoke to said, "Do you know where your feet are?" And I physically could not find my feet. So there was a level of physically feeling ungrounded, and then actually looking inside. There was nothing to look at outside, so to speak. Everything that I thought I could put my hands on and that was real and that felt like everything I was holding on to was gone or going to be gone. And so I had to say, well, what will I hold on to? What is important to me? What do I really want? What do I really value? And there was nothing there for me to look at. I didn't have that alignment of what was super important to me on a level. If you took everything externally away from me, what was left was a big hole. So the alignment comes with, do we really know what we really want in terms of sustainability? This external world, as you well know, is ever changing, ever changing. So we need something to anchor ourselves and to hold on to and to make us feel important, valued, and and able to sustain the ever-changing world. I think that's the best way to put it.
Okay, and I agree, and that sounds like a scary place to be in saying all there is stuff on the outside, and at that point it sounds like it's just it's just showing off for others. You take away what's on the outside and there's nothing really left, and then if it's all at the outside, then you're kind of subject to the whims of like life events that happen to you or the relationships around you. Everyone else is kind of pushing and pulling you in all these directions where it's just like, well, what about me? So you said like, okay, well, I need to figure out what I want, and then after all of your research and things like that, what did that end up being? What kind of things did you realize needed to be on the inside for you?
I think I needed to have a regular practice of reminding myself regularly of what felt good to me in my body, or just to know what's inside my body. So for me, that came about with meditation. It came about with breath work, just following my breath and just being comfortable with feeling my insides. And that sounds very strange, but that's actually one of the first things that I teach people. And when I get on a call with somebody, I slow everything down. Just slow everything down to the point of being able to recognize what our breath is doing, because it's the strongest first line of influence that we have. I mean, Robert, how long can you live without breathing?
Not long, a couple of minutes maybe.
Right. So something like that has the most power over us. We can utilize and anchor that and start to use our breath as a way of stabilizing our whole environment. pretty much our inner environment for sure. So breath work was super important for me. And then I started to see that as I worked with people and with myself also, I started to see that there were certain things that repeatedly needed to be addressed. And I call it kind of, I got kind of like this little formula thing that if I were to explain to you like what I do with people, I would say that I catch what's going on. And what I do, by the way, what I do for other people is what I do for myself too. So it's all encompassing. So we notice, we have an awareness that something's not quite right. There's something missing. There's something not happening. Either it's coming up physical or it's coming up in not being able to attain your desires. Sometimes it's relationships too. A lot of times it's relationships. And then we have to soothe and calm the chemistry of our body. So you ask me, what do I do? So that breathing, that meditation, that whatever practices that I decide to use, maybe it's even journaling too. I'm working with my inner chemistry, my inner body chemistry, which is super powerful. And the breath is one of those first things that'll influence that. So I need to soothe. We all need to soothe our body chemistry. We need to learn how to do that. And then we also need to get really clear about what's clogging the pipes, so to speak. So there's usually some sort of an emotion or an incident or a circumstance that's repeating itself in one of those loops of homeostasis. So we're on this system of feedback loops. And those feedback loops get a little stuck sometimes. And that's when that rumination of things keep going. You ever had that, Robert, where something's just ruminating over and over and over in your head?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Can't shut the brain off. It seems like it keep going back to the same place for sure.
Yeah. So we've got to clear that up. So that's one of the processes that we do is we clear out those rocks and those lip pebbles in the pipes, so to speak. And I've got the processes to do that. And then we get really clear. Once you get those pipes cleaned out and once you get your chemistry calmed down, and of course you were aware that there's a need for something to change, you have then an opportunity to shine a really laser pointed right at the crystal that's going to make everything clear for you. It just becomes really evident. And then we clean up the language around that. We write it out and we get really specific about what that is. And then I teach people how to embody it, which brings it back to the question that you asked me is what do you do? What do you do to find that gap that's in there? And we need to bring things into our body. And we do that through the breath, again, back to meditation and back to the breath, back to journaling it, back to EFT or tapping, any process that says, I want this and I want it to feel it through all the parts of my being, and I want it to even change my chemistry. And that's how we begin to start to bring it to life.
That's really interesting. And there's some things that I noticed in what you were describing there. And one first sounds like it's important to have those pipes cleaned out first, because you always hear about, there's this productivity tip or there's this breathing tip, but there's always, like little band-aids all around the internet, or you do kind of research and there's like a little quick fix for the problem. And then it's like, well, that's great. That kind of gets you through a couple of more days or a couple of more weeks. But then what about the underlying issue? So that's I thought that was kind of interesting there, how it's like, well, figure out what's stopping you now and clear it out. That way you can start with that clean slate, and that way you know exactly what you need to do. And then what I'm hearing a lot from you also is how important it is, you've mentioned journaling a few times, how important it is to write some of these things down and have these things clear, as opposed to just moving forward any possible way, knowing where you want to move forward to, knowing what you want, so that way you know when you end up there.
Yes, good spot on there, Robert, because that is so super, super important. I mean, there's even science on it. Science, they've actually done research where they've said, if you can write down with the greatest amount of clarity that you can, your goal or your aspiration, your desire, you will have a greater chance of achieving it. And then there's another research that same research took it a step further and said, if you tell somebody what you want, then it becomes even greater possibility of success. And if you, I say, I take it one step further. I say if you embody it, that's by writing it out, staying in tune with it, breathing it in, visualizing it, seeing it. So all of that together, yes, brings it to life.
And I'm hearing in the way you describe that, like the how important the practice and the repetitions are, because it makes me think of like, because like I'm not super spiritual and stuff like that, and a lot of the Eastern medicine, like just me personally, I'm not a huge believer in it. But I mean, as long as it's something that works, it helps people, totally down for that. But when you were describing about having that written thing and breathing it in and embodying it, it reminded me of like the Think and Grow Rich sort of stuff, where they say have your plan and write it down, and then have some sort of daily ritual where you rewrite your plan, or you wake up first thing in the morning and you read your plan aloud, so that way it just like becomes a part of who you are over and over again. And so I imagine that the same holds true with all this advice that you're giving, right? That it's not enough to just do it once or just do it for a period of time, but have these rituals, these habits. That way we keep getting better and better. It becomes automatic, and that way we don't backslide to the place we were before. Is that sort of on the right track?
Absolutely. I call it building the muscle. We need to build the muscle for when we get out into the world, so that we know those muscles know what to do. So if we're practicing our inner peace and really getting clear about what we want by our journaling and our everything, all of our practices and processes, but that's in our little comfort zone right there. We've got to build that on a regular basis, to build that muscle, so that when we take it out into the world, we now know what to do. So for an example, if you've written down that you want to have more peaceful relationships, something like that, and now you go off back to work and it's not so peaceful, you have an opportunity to remember, the muscle remembers the peace that you want inside of you, and now can apply that process out in the outer world, and maybe walk away from the drama, or decide how you will engage in ways that will not disturb your peace, because you have built the muscle that knows what it wants.
I like it. So having those tools to use at your disposal, maybe not being as predictable or not stuck in the same cycles that you're usually stuck in, and maybe making smarter decisions and thinking things through in a different way that maybe beforehand we were just kind of going through here blindly. And so when dealing with any kind of like this, self-improvement, self-help and stuff like that, I'm sure that you deal with a lot of people who have like that resistance to change, right? And I ask this because like I myself, I mean, I'm human too all the time. Like there are things that I don't want to change, or I know I should do something, and it seems like sometimes all the information in the world can be at my fingertips, but I still don't want to change something. So, I mean, do you come across this kind of thing with your coaching clients? If you say, they're in this bad situation, you say, do you want to keep going with this? I could help you, but they still don't want to actually do. Do you come across that, people who are just resistant to that, and what do you do about it?
Yes, absolutely. We're all are humans in our human body, having to deal with our human chemistry. I call it a chemical reaction, actually. And so what do you do about it? Well, first of all, I recognize it and call it out. So often, if we just hide things in the darkness, we don't have any opportunity to change it. So we call it out. We say, literally, I, just as you said, I see that I want something, but and it can be right in front of me, and I still don't want to grab it. I still don't want to do the work. I still don't want to take it. I still don't want to apply it. And I don't know what that is. And we say, well, welcome to the human world. Welcome to your body chemistry doing what it's supposed to do. And what I mean by that is we have this inner protective, you've heard of flight, flight, freeze response, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're having resistance towards something, it's because our body is doing what it thinks it wants us to do and keeping us from the harm, or nowadays it's not the tiger anymore, it's just the emotional stress of it. So if you're, procrastination, like exercise for me is like, the hardest thing for me, right? So I've had to try to find ways to work with my resistance to it, which probably came a long time ago from I got an F in high school tennis because I sat and talked with my friend all day long, right? And so I think I still have that kind of reaction to exercise, like it's stupid. It's not what I want to do, and it's going to cause me that trauma of getting that F again if I fail. And so my body is saying, if you do this, or my mind is saying, if you do this, do it differently, or do it in a way that feels comfortable for you. And I just want to let you know that there's potential danger ahead if you keep doing it the same way you've been doing it. So welcome to the human world. Let's shine a light on it. Let's move it through.
Interesting. And so that concept of bringing those things into the light is making a lot of sense here, because even the way you described it sounds super irrational, right? I don't want to exercise because however many years ago I got an F from not exercising seems like just like super silly. So doing it differently, that makes a lot of sense there, where like, if we keep trying to force it with willpower, or the same old action is not going to work. So there's very little to lose by doing it differently. And if we keep doing it the same way, maybe we think there's nothing to lose, but what there is to lose is time of having the same problems and frustrations, which sounds like a pretty scary place to be. And so as we're winding things down here, do you have like a number one tip or a number one secret, or just like a thing about all this that everyone out there needs to know?
Well, I think you said it for me right there, Robert. I really like that. Is shine a light on it. Don't hide it. Whatever feels like is missing or out of alignment or just not quite right, have the courage and have the willingness to take a look at it. And when you start to take a look at it and possibly get somebody to help you look at it, it really doesn't feel as confusing and it doesn't feel as painful, because our human body and mind is set up to allow us to have ease. And if we think there's going to be pain, we're going to resist it. So be willing to realize that there is relief on the other side when you're willing to look at something. And it doesn't have to be painful, and you don't have to relive stuff. That's probably one thing that people say to me is, yeah, I'm willing to let go of the past, but I don't want to relive it all. I don't want you to go through all that crap again. I say, fine, let's not do it, but let's shine a light and move on.
Beautiful. I love it. So you don't have to relive it, shine a light on it. And that really resonates with me there, because I used to think, like, if I would go and listen to some self-help or do a Google search on how to solve some anxiety or some stress problem or things like that, I used to feel really down on myself. I used to think, well, geez, things must be really bad with me if I'm so desperate that I'm doing a Google search. And then at some point along the way, someone told me that the fact that you're looking into a solution means that you're already on track to come out of it. That if you were totally oblivious to the problem and just having a miserable life and you weren't looking into solutions, that would be the bad scenario to avoid. But if we're already curious and if we're listening, and people listening to this episode right now, if you're listening to this right now, which you are, that's proof right there that you're willing to try new things, that you're curious about other alternatives and possibilities, and that you're on your way to solving whatever problem that you have going through them. There's always going to be problems, because like you said, we're alive. So you're alive, you have problems, and so it's in our best interest to keep on going and to be curious and to look into these solutions. And if you guys are listening right now, then you're on the right track. But if they really want to get to that next milestone, if they really want to make some progress, then you're going to want to check out Laura's website and what she has to offer. And so what do you have to offer exactly, Laura? Are there like books? Is there a way for them to sign up for coaching for you? What sort of stuff should people go and check out after listening to our talk here today?
Well, there's a couple of ways to work with me. The most powerful way is the one-on-one coaching. And it doesn't just happen. You don't just sign up for coaching. So that open-mindedness to look at something, that willingness to look at it, that's all I ask from the beginning. And that happens with just a simple conversation. So we just get on my virtual office and we have a conversation about where you're at right now, where you might want to go, where does it feel like there's some gaps in your external and internal alignment. And we figure out uniquely for that person what would help them achieve that. Would it be a 3-month coaching agreement? Would it be something shorter? And the something shorter sometimes comes in a one session, which I call an alignment session. And you can just book that with me too. That's often what I have for clients that I've already worked with, but also it's sometimes for people who want to have a shorter agreement, but they do want to dive in a little bit and take a look at and have something tangible to walk away with that'll work for them. So that's probably the first thing is have a conversation with me, and don't be thinking that it's a sales pitch, because I don't sell people coaching, honestly. I think it's something that it's a relationship, and you need to feel comfortable in that, and that's what the conversation is.
Okay, great. So you have nothing to lose by having that conversation and kind of checking things out and seeing where things are. And so where should people go for that? Is your website lauralong.pro?
Yep, and right on there is a page that says let's talk and let's connect, and there's a couple of different ways to do that. Pretty much you just click on that and it walks you straight through it.
Great stuff. So make sure that you head over there right now. That's lauralong.pro. That's LAURALONG.PRO. Go there. And once again, like we said, if you've been looking for solutions for your mindset, for productivity, for your mood, for just being a better person in general, then you need to kind of keep going on that path, because what would be the point of dabbling a little bit on improving your life and then going right back to the same way that you've always been doing it? Like, if you're already kind of dipping your toe in the water, go all in, go to Laura Long's website, check out what she has for you, and see if you can get whatever problem you have right now licked, to get those things solved and be on the track for a much better life, because there's always room for improvement. So check out lauralong.pro to see what she has for you. Laura Long, life coach, energy worker, and teacher. It's been super great having you on, delivering some of this insights. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming by.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. It was great talking to you today.
Attention. It's time to make your computer work for you. If you struggled getting the most out of every day, getting your computer, your website, and your business to make you money while you sleep, please take a quick look at our book, The Checklist Mindset, www.checklistmindset.com.